Okay, part 3. The Interduchy Tournament, 3rd year. We finished. Will this do, Lady Rosemine? At lunchtime on the day before the Interduchy Tournament, Ignaz and Marianne left the brewing room and came over to me with magic tools in hand. Several apprentice scholars followed after them. Here are our prototypes, Marianne said. There are many improvements we would like to make to them, but please take a look. She put one of the magic tools on the table, and after slotting in some sheet music, leisurely began to turn the attached handle. Like a music box, the tool played a tune in response. Ignaz then demonstrated his fusion of non-set paper with our tiny, improved teleportation circle by sending a book to a nearby shelf. They had both completed their tasks. Woo woo! Unfortunately, there is not enough time before the Interduchy Tournament for any further changes to be made, Charlotte said, and even if there were, we do not have the mana or materials to spare. Think these prototypes are good enough to present on their own, Wilfred asked. My siblings looked a little weary themselves. They had been helping the apprentice scholars whenever possible. In spite of their exhaustion, they and everyone else looked satisfied with what they had produced. I believe so, I replied, then returned to Ignaz and Marianne. I am impressed that you were able to finish them in time. As am I, Feline added, her eyes full of admiration. Archnobles truly are incredible. Even with the advice and plans that you and Lord Raymond provided, Lady Rosemont, I would never have been able to brew these on my own. One's mana capacity determined what one could make, so there was much that she couldn't do herself. Royal Academy classes require a lot of mana, Feline continued, so I was planning to compress mine as much as possible from spring to autumn. However, we will spend that time increasing our own mana capacities, Ignaz said, wearing a competitive grin that seemed to say he wouldn't lose to Feline and the others. I was in full support of their rivalry, so that motivation would benefit them all in the long run. Will you be practicing the presentation, I asked. In a moment, yes. But as we invented these ourselves, I do not foresee any issues. Indeed, this is going to be a lot easier than presenting the high-level brews and magic tools that Jawanko students had made, and which our own scholars still didn't really understand. Lady Rosemine, Marianne said, I would appreciate a more in-depth explanation of Ehrenfest's paper. Limited to what can be made public, of course. I agreed, and we spent the afternoon completing the final preparations for our joint research with Jawanko. I was going to be spending the entire day in the dormitory, which meant my apprentice knights can spend the whole day training. Pound cakes have arrived from Ehrenfest, Brunhilde announced. Let us take them into the meeting room. The apprentice attendants all moved at once. Not just the pound cakes, but also the cookies we had ordered from the Offmer Company were now being sent over. For the Introductory Tournament, we had decided to provide baked goods that could be prepared in advance. We were expecting more visitors than the dormitory chefs could provide for, however, which is why we had requested help from the castle and the Offmer Company. The castle and temple kitchens should be fairly busy right about now, I commented. We had asked the castle chefs to prepare meals for Ferdinand as well, but they had told us they were too busy with winter socializing and the Introductory Tournament. Thus we had passed the request on to his old chefs, still serving us in the High Priest's chambers. They would surely be able to make food to his tastes. Seeing everyone so active filled me with the excitement one felt when a festival was fast approaching. Lady Rosemine, copies of the second volume of the story of Fernestine have arrived with the sweets, Lisletta said, bringing over a box of new books. You promised to share one with Lady Hannelore, did you not? Shall we inform her by ordinance? Mariella gave a gleeful exclamation, her green eyes still sparkling as she marveled at the box. I couldn't give this duty to any of my apprentice scholars, though. I needed them to focus on preparing for tomorrow. I will deliver them, I said. Mariella, I am afraid you will need to wait until after the Introductory Tournament to read this new volume. I have not yet read it myself, you know. And you will also need to wait until after the Introductory Tournament, Milady, Riarda stressed. I can only nod in response, accepting my harsh fate. Mariella returned to her work with the quiet remark that she wished to read the new volume as soon as possible, and at that moment I felt as though our hearts were one. It wasn't long after I informed Hannelore of the new Fernestine volume having arrived that we received her response. I am looking forward to it, delivered in the most charmingly eager voice. It was the morning of the Introductory Tournament, and a sweet scent carried through the Ehrenfest dormitory. The chefs had started making sweets immediately after preparing the dishes that kept well, such as sandwiches and soup. Everyone finished their breakfast sooner than usual, then started on their duties for the Introductory Tournament. The apprentice attendants directed servants while bringing one box of sweets after another out of the meeting room, being used for storage. The apprentice knights who would be playing dinner focused on their training exercises, and those who were too young instead guarded our Archduke candidates. All right, let's go, Wilfred ordered the apprentice scholars. He and Charlotte were helping them set out the platform for their presentations. I asked to go with them, but my request was immediately deemed too unsafe, since only the younger apprentice knights were accompanying me today. We can't predict what the lesser and middle duchies that invaded our dinner game might do, Wolverine explained. I've asked Mother and Father to bring more of the Knights Order as guards this year. Stay in this dormitory until they arrive. Understood, I replied. He was evidently taking things very seriously, so I couldn't just insist on following them anyway. I wish you well with your preparations. And so I merely stood and watched as Wolverine and Charlotte left with the apprentice scholars. I knew it had to be this way for safety's sake, but I couldn't help feeling left out. There were still some people going in and out of the dormitory for one reason or another, but I was now almost entirely alone in the common room. I gazed around at its vast emptiness, at which point Riarda placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Perhaps you could go check the tea party room and what milady preparations have now been made for Lord Ferdinand and the others to sleep there. I think I will. Together we made our way to the door closest to the stairway leading to the kitchen, the entrance to the tea party room. Riarda unlocked the door with a clunk and then opened it for me. The tea party rooms were quite large, as one could infer from the fact we had invited representation from every single duchy to ours when I was a first year. I stepped inside to find that a series of screens now divided the interior into what were essentially 3 individual rooms. The room farthest from the entrance is for Lord Ferdinand and contains that special bench for him to sleep on, Riarda said. We had it sent over from Ehrenfest as per your request, milady. It was the mattress bench ordered from Zack. Sending it all the way from Ehrenfest had apparently been troublesome and resulted in many complaints, but it was guaranteed to be a lot more comfortable than just sticking cushions on a flat board with some sheets pulled over it. I made sure it had a proper mattress, then nodded in satisfaction. I see this box contains the comforter, I said. Justice will understand what to do once everything has been explained to him. There are also many checks to be done, as there is going to be an Ahrensbach retainer present. As well as the box containing the comforter was its chest for storing one's luggage and a magic tool that will provide light. These are not quite bed curtains, Riarda said, indicating the screens, but I expect they will make it easier for Lord Ferdinand to sleep. There was a chair for the attendant who would be serving as night watchman, so the furthest away space was purely for sleeping. The middle room contained a table and chairs. The person overseeing the preparations for the tea party room had probably assumed that everyone would eat together here. After the introductory tournament, the Ob will eat with the students and praise their efforts, Riarda explained. You and my boy Wilfried are to come here and treat Lord Ferdinand in the meantime. Lord Sylvester will join us once everyone has eaten. My heart soared at the thought of eating dinner with Ferdinand, but then I realized he would probably spend the entire meal lecturing me. To avoid that worst-case scenario, I would need to do exactly as Eckert had taught me and continually bring up research. Riarda, I said, I would like to offer Ferdinand the documents that Herscher gave me. Please prepare some ink and paper as well. It is already done, milady. In classic Riarda fashion, she was already one step ahead. That research could easily become our main topic of conversation for the night, and with Ferdinand so starved for new knowledge, I didn't see how it could go wrong. It could go wrong because the Ahrensbach noble could probably see it, or attendant could probably see it and give it to someone else, or tell someone else about it. I think this should make this area closest to the door a resting spot for retainers, I said. Like in the room we were giving for Ferdinand, there was a box containing a comforter and a chest for one's luggage, but it was fairly barren otherwise. At the very least, it wasn't good enough for someone visiting from another duchy. Riarda shook her head. We need not put so much thought into where the retainers sleep. Justice is a wanderer, and who would even sleep outside without complaint. Eckert is used to harsh accommodations as a knight, and the Ahrensbach retainer will presumably be too on edge to sleep at all. No one from another duchy would so willingly let their guard down in a room that anyone from Ehrenfest can enter. Indeed, for Ferdinand and the others from Ehrenfest, this was like a comfortable return to their homeland. The same cannot be said for someone from Ahrensbach. Riarda continued, As there are going to be people from other duchies arriving after breakfast to welcome the graduating students, we have decided to hide the fact that anyone spent the night here. Just as Ferdinand was having to fetch Detlinde, members of other duchies were going to be coming to us to pick up Ehrenfest students. As soon as Ferdinand and the others finished eating breakfast, our tea party room would need to be prepared to accommodate guests. I see you have all thought this out. Thank you, Riarda. Tell the other attendants they have my thanks as well. Yes, milady. Having confirmed that all the necessary preparations were complete, I returned to the common room. Good day, Lady Rosemine. Little by little, the guardians of our graduating students began to arrive. I watched as parents dressed in gaudy attire headed to the arena where the tournament was being held, an ordinary sight by this point, and soon spotted some familiar faces among one of the groups passing through. Cornelius, Angelica, and Hartman were dressed in formal clothing like everyone else. Lady Rosemine, they said, good morning. You three, I exclaimed despite myself. What are you doing here at the Royal Academy? I came to see my fiancé perform, Hartman replied. I also need to properly inform her family of the change in my situation and earn their pardon. It was very likely that his new position as high priest would result in his engagement with Clarissa being cancelled. It was my fault, really. But as I was reflecting on that, Hartman smiled. You need not worry, he said. I expect that the Zen's participation in your dedication ritual and the newfound efficacy of religious ceremonies will prevent them from lodging any meaningful protests. Even if they do, I am certain that Clarissa will come to Ehrenfest alone if need be. We will need to discuss what to do in such an event. Indeed we will, I replied with a giggle. Remembering Clarissa's enthusiasm and intensity, she certainly did seem like someone who would charge into Ehrenfest all on her own. So some preparations were in order. Are you here for your fiancé as well, Cornelius? I asked, shooting him a teasing look. Did you come to see Lenore perform? If so, then it was surely fine for me to treat him as not as a guard knight but as my brother. We are here to protect you, but we were told to be discreet about it and to have reasonable excuses for attending. But personally, I'm here to see both you and Lenore. In other words, I was justified in treating him as my brother. That was nice to know. I would need to explain in excruciating detail just how hard Lenore had been working for this year. What about you, Angelica? I asked. Hartman and Cornelius both have fiancés, but you don't have a partner in the Royal Academy, do you? I came to see whether Traga has grown strong enough to receive my hand in marriage. If not, I will marry Lord Boniface. Oh no, it's so stupid. I know it's common in this world, but it's still stupid to me. Angelica explained, her voice tinged with sorrow. From a third-party perspective, Traga was a much more appropriate suitor than the elderly Bonifacius. Angelica only had eyes for strength, however, and if one were to pit the two men against each other in that regard, well, it was no contest. But don't be fooled, Cornelius interjected with an exasperated shrug. This is all just an excuse. Angelica came up with to avoid having to memorize the name of the gods. It seemed that her desire to escape from studying overlapped with Bonifacius' reluctance to marry someone young enough to be his granddaughter. Angelica, you'll grow stronger if you obtain more divine blessings, I said. If nothing else, memorize the names of the primary gods and the subordinate gods you want the divine protections of. I think I can do that, she replied, seeming a bit more motivated. If only she could manage that much, then I was confident she would succeed. Luridi of Jawsbrenner had already obtained a new divine protection after praying ceaselessly to the goddess of sprouts. Incidentally, is Daniel not coming, I asked? Of all my guard knights staying in Ehrenfest, he was the one person who was nowhere to be seen. Only 3 people could teleport at a time, so I thought that maybe he just hadn't arrived yet. But Cornelius shook his head. As a mono-detection specialist, he was asked to stay behind and observe the former Veronica faction. But above all else, he didn't have a good excuse for coming to the Royal Academy. Hartman nodded. I gave him some very sage advice in my suggestion that he start dating one of the students, but he simply wailed that it wasn't possible. Don't be such a bully, Hartman, I cried. You know he can't get a girlfriend and is struggling with his lack of marriage prospects. I bet you gave him that advice right after putting on your most handsome smile and bragging about going to see your younger fiancé perform on stage. It's just cruel. Daniel was a sensitive soul. Having to endure such mean teasing very well might have broken his heart. I can already picture him shedding silent tears, unable to talk back to an arch-noble like Hartman. Hartman merely smiled in the face of my complaints, not showing an ounce of regret. I gave Daniel that advice because I believe he could succeed if only he tried. Do you not think you are being cruel, Lady Rosamine, for assuming that he will never find a partner no matter what he does? He's right. I'm sorry, Daniel. Instead of believing in you, I just kind of accepted that you were going to be single forever. I've been a failure of a lady. But no more. From this point forward, I was going to start believing in Daniel. He was capable of getting a girlfriend. He would secure himself a wife. As I was hammering those thoughts into my mind as facts, someone knocked the back of my head. Hey there, problem child. Causing any problems today? I turned to see Sylvester looking down at me. There were heavy bags under his eyes, and his cheeks were more gaunt than the last time I saw him. All that, coupled with the sickly pallor of his face, spoke to how extremely draining it must have been cleaning up after the purge. Hi, Sylvester, I said. You seem pretty tired. And whose fault do you think that is? He prodded my cheek and started grinding his finger into it. Once you're back in Ehrenfest, get ready for the lecture of a lifetime, missy. I groaned, already able to imagine the thunder he was going to unleash. Should, one of Ferdinand's rejuvenation potions cheer you up? Trying to finish me off, are you? He asked, responding to my generosity with a sharp glare. I wouldn't give you one of those potions in a situation like this. I'm referring to the kind version. We have some left over from the batch we made for the dedication ritual. No, thanks. That would only make me drowsy. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. Now, if you're ready, let's get going. I looked around, but I could only see members of the Ehrenfest Knights Order. Florencia was nowhere to be seen, nor was Cardstead among Sylvester's guards. Sylvester, where are Florencia and Father? I asked. Cardstead and Bonifacius are staying home. We don't know what the former Veronica faction might do if too many of us come here for the Interduchy tournament. As for Florencia, I made her stay in bed today. She looked as sickly as you normally do before you collapse. What? I exclaimed. Is she okay? I didn't think I'd ever seen Florencia unwell before. She always wore a calm smile and never looked fazed in the slightest. Sylvester shook his head. Nothing we can do but let her rest. The Interduchy tournament would have put too much pressure on her, what with all the negotiations between duchies and the like. If she's feeling better by tomorrow morning, then I'll say she can come to the graduation ceremony. She should be able to make it through that, since it only involves sitting and watching. We had been so swamped with visitors last year that we had spent the entire day keeping up with them, and it was easy to imagine that we would receive even more this year. Considering how many duchies had participated in our dedication ritual, Sylvester was right. It wasn't a good environment for someone who was feeling sick. You and I are going to pair up for socializing this year, so are Wilfred and Charlotte. After all the trouble you caused since the last tournament, who knows what visitors we'll get. My head hurts just thinking about it. My apologies. It's not like she did it on purpose. I sped through my remaining preparations and started toward the arena with my retainers, Sylvester and the knights protecting him. Along the way, we gave words of encouragement to those who were going to be presenting research or playing dinner, and went over to our plan for today's socializing. We must check our capes and brooches before you can enter. Upon reaching the entrance to the arena, we were stopped by several black cape members of the Sovereign Knights Order. More careful checks were now being carried out as a result of last year's attack, so the terrorists had gotten in using workstock brooches. Because I was with Sylvester and Archduke, we were allowed through after just a brief inspection. The atmosphere in the arena was a lot more tense than last year. Sovereign Knights were positioned all around, and many of the attendees looked uncomfortable under their pointed glares. This uneasy situation would no doubt continue until either Workstock's foundation of magic was discovered, or the Gruchite was found. Rosemine, where's our spot? I would imagine over there, near that huge clump of ochre capes. I was told to stay in the dormitory until you arrived, so I haven't been here since before they started getting ready for the tournament. It was worth noting that because I was so short, I could hardly see past all the guard knights surrounding us. I see. Sounds like you've been trying to keep things peaceful in your own way, Sylvester replied, sounding a little satisfied as he made his way toward our students. You should praise Wilfrid, not me. I intended to take part in all the preparations. You really need to be more conscious of your safety. After passing through one throng of colored capes after another, we arrived at Ehrenfest's spot to find that everyone was ready for the tournament. Ehrenfest, Lady Rosemine, this way. Brunhilde guided us to our seats, whereupon Sylvester explained that Florencia was absent, and told us how we were going to attend to today's guests. Oh my, Mother cannot participate, Charlotte said. Is she okay? She might be well enough to come tomorrow. No pressure, but we've messed up socializing today. She'll be devastated and think she let us all down. Don't let that happen. Right. Wilfred and Charlotte sat down together, but I sat with Sylvester. He had positioned his chair so they could easily kick my leg, a signal for me to shut my mouth at once, he explained. Ehrenfest knights were lined up behind us, while Hartmut, Cornelius, and Angelica were nearby, all dressed in adult clothing. Wait a minute. Kick her leg? Hello, dude, she's still wearing the charms. Are you really going to try and do that when something could happen? Our first visitors are going to be from Dunkelfelger, I guarantee it, Cornelius said, his expression guarded. They keep looking over at us. I could tell they're pretty much champing at the bit. Dunkelfelger was on the opposite side of the arena from us, so its spot was easy to observe. I enhanced my eyesight and saw that indeed Dunkelfelger was standing right on the duchy line with an eager-looking band of knights. Uh-oh. Handler was desperately trying to pull him back by his cape. Good luck with that. Oh no. Lady Handler now has it rough. I'm so glad I wasn't reincarnated into Dunkelfelger. You would have died. You would have died. Actually, no. She probably wouldn't have. She probably would have been into a regular body. Though, with her luck, she would have been in a sickly body and she would have died anyway. A slender woman then approached the father-daughter pair and said something. I was too far away to make out her remark, but whatever it was, it made the Ob trudge back to his table. She must be his first wife. Also sitting at the table was Lestela, and beside him was a girl wearing a familiar hairpin. She was probably his fiancée. Okay, so he gave up on Rosemine. Alright. Is that Lord Ferdinand over there, Hartmut suddenly asked? I can see Ehrenfest's capes among the Ehrensbach ones. I turned my attention to Ehrensbach's spot, which was right beside Dunkelfelger's. Just as Hartmut had said, there were 3 dark yellow capes among the light violet ones. Ferdinand, Justice, and Eckert. I watched them closely, trying not to lean over the table in my excitement. I could see Raymond holding the stuffed shoe mill for his presentation, and desperately trying to explain something to Ferdinand, who was rubbing his temples. Oh, God. Justice is finding this funny. Oh, Ferdinand's gonna have something to say about this. Ferdinand, who was rubbing his temples. Justice had a hand over his mouth as he tried to stifle his laughter. Evidently, our magic tool idea was being very well received. I wanted to go over and give Raymond some support, but Arensbach's spot was too far away. Ferdinand isn't coming this way, I murmured. I expect he'll come along when the others from Arensbach greet us, Sylvester replied. He's already involved in their administration, and they need to further publicize his engagement this year. That greeting would be a good opportunity to hand over Heisch's cape, I thought. I saw the box Riarda had at the ready and smiled. Dinner shall now begin, Roffin announced. The called duchy will come forward. The interduchy tournament had officially begun. There was a declaration from Glassenburg I, and the first duchy was summoned. At once a group of Dunkelfelgerians began moving in our direction, with the first wife gracefully taking the lead and Hannelore hurrying along behind her. They were on the opposite side of the arena from us, as they had quite a ways to go. What about Ob Dunkelfelger? I guess she told them, no, you can't go. You have to stay here. I'll go. The Ob had looked almost desperate to see us a moment ago, but he hadn't moved from his seat. He was staying behind with Lestelad, it appeared. Maybe the first wife doesn't want him challenging us to dinner again? Yeah, we don't need that. I continued to watch them with my head tilted to one side. Meanwhile, our apprentice attendants began preparing for Dunkelfelger's arrival, and Sylvester sat up straight. Keep your head straight, Rosemine. They're coming. We're going to demand that they stop trying to court you and make it clear that we're not taking Lady Hannelore, right? Right. Ehrenfest didn't want to put up with any more of this troublesome business, so we had informed Dunkelfelger through letters and reports that we were open to negotiating if they stopped trying to get my engagement cancelled. Wolverine, Charlotte, Rosemine are not going to be hosting the Greater Duchies, starting with Dunkelfelger, Sylvester explained. You two deal with everyone else. Wolfred and Charlotte replied with firm nods. As our first visitors came closer and closer, Hertman checked the ink and paper alongside the scholars, while Cornelius and Angelica moved to more easily defensible positions. Socializing with Dunkelfelger. Good day, Ob Ehrenfest, Dunkelfelger's first wife said when she arrived in front of us. Her eyes, which were as red as Hannelore's, were crinkled in a smile, but it was clear that she was observing us intently. She was scary in an entirely different way from Ob Dunkelfelger, who chirped incessantly about dinner. Good day, Lady Sigonde of Dunkelfelger, I replied, feeling so tense that my throat went dry. Sylvester and I both stood up to give proper greetings. Then we offered Sigonde and Hannelore seats. Printing, books, rituals, Sigonde said with a smile, there is much I wish for us to discuss, but let us first focus on the eventful game of dinner, which holds great significance for the future of both our duchies. Although there was an interruption midway through, the judge did not pause the match. Thus it concluded that when Hannelore willingly left Dunkelfelger's base. Sigonde spoke in a soft voice and with a peaceful expression, but she was noticeably critical of her daughter's actions. Hannelore herself was looking down at the ground and visibly shrinking into herself. Lady Hannelore left her base only because it was too dangerous for her to remain there without guard knights, I said, trying to justify her decision. She had been fearfully enduring the onslaught from above all on her own, without anyone to protect her. But despite my pleas, Sigonde's smile never so much as wavered. The knights headed skyward to protect their treasure from the attack magic raining down upon them, she replied, and yet Hannelore still decided to leave the base of her own will. In doing so, did she not betray those who were fighting for her sake? That wasn't how I viewed the situation at all. I was raised to believe that Archduke candidates are to be guarded by their knights. As such, Lady Hannelore being left alone constitutes a dereliction of duty for those meant to protect her. Oh my, is this to say that Ehrenfest considers Hannelore's actions acceptable? Yes. Hannelore's actions might have been deserving of criticism by Dunkelfelger standards, but we saw things differently in Ehrenfest. I thought to protest further, but Sylvester spoke up from beside me before I could. Guard knights live to protect the archducal family, and one's treasure should be considered above all else in the game of dinner. It is the fault of the knights that Lady Hannelore was taken. Right, exactly. The guard knights are to blame for abandoning her. I showed my agreement with a big nod. Sigonde cast her eyes down in thought. So, is this Ehrenfest's stance? Hannelore should not be blamed for leaving Dunkelfelger's base of her own volition? I was glad to see that Sigonde didn't share Ob Dunkelfelger's desire to resolve every dispute with the game of dinner. And it seemed that we had even come to something of an understanding. Before I could express my relief, however, her lips twisted into a more determined smile. I see now that even if Tarkus is born through Flotrain's power, the guidance of Dragoner will unfailingly take him to Verfremer, she said, then sighed so ambiguously that it was hard to tell whether she was feeling relief or regret. What does that mean? To begin with, the name Tarkus didn't ring a bell. Was it a kind of different animal unique to Dunkelfelger, or perhaps a minor figure from some obscure mythos? I think I could figure out the rest, though. Tarkus, whatever or whoever that is, would evidently be born to fresh water and then end up going to the ocean when the time is right. So what Siglunde means to say is when people grow up, they move to places that better suit who they are. As I was working through what she meant, maintaining a vague smile all the while, Siglunde looked between Sylvester and me. I suddenly felt trapped in her red eyes, and I couldn't help but swallow hard. Dunkelfelger lost the match, so Handler will marry into Ehrenfest, Siglunde said plainly. That should do, as it seems your duchy is her Fremer. Hold on a moment, did she just agree to give Lady Handler to Ehrenfest? Before we even had a chance to say that she doesn't have to? Siglunde was bringing the discussion to an end before we could even express our thoughts or hopes. Sylvester and I exchanged looks before hurrying to change her mind. You mentioned that marrying into Ehrenfest is what Lady Handler desires, but is that true? She will end up being only a second wife. The very idea of an Archduke candidate from Dunkelfelger, the second highest-ranking duchy in Irrigensmith, becoming a second wife in Ehrenfest was unthinkable. Siglunde seemed like someone who was willing to listen to reason, unlike her did her obsessed husband. So I wanted her to think about her daughter's future a little more carefully. However, she left our duchy's base of her own will, Siglunde said. For her to have made such a choice, she must have desired the natural consequences. We were more troubled than anyone to learn that a Dunkelfelger Archduke candidate wishes to hold a secondary position in Ehrenfest. Siglunde seemed convinced that her daughter had acted out of self-interest, but I couldn't think of one occasion when Handler had mentioned wanting to marry into Ehrenfest. I kept half an eye on my fellow bookworm, but she just kept staring at the ground with her mouth shut, like she was swallowing whatever she wanted to say. Lady Handler. Seeing her like this, I was reminded of when Vestala had silenced her protests while challenging us to dinner. No matter how you looked at it, she wasn't acting like someone who wanted to marry into Ehrenfest. On closer inspection, she was literally trembling. Sylvester, having likely come to the same conclusion, turned his dark green eyes to Siglunde. If you would allow me to be so bold, I would say that Ehrenfest is an upstart duchy that just barely reached 8th place in the duchy rankings and does not yet meet the expectations put upon it. We are in no position to host a Dunkelfelger Archduke candidate. Siglunde nodded with a smile. You are correct. At the moment, Ehrenfest's only value is in Lady Rosemine, who introduced new trends and industries, knows an impressive amount about ancient language and rituals, and possesses the leadership necessary to unify her dormitory despite all that is happening. You are far from being worthy of one of our Archduke candidates. She was agreeing with us, but it's still irritating. In regard to our trends and such, I only came up with the ideas. Our craftspeople deserved all the credit for making them. And while I did manage the dormitory to some degree, Wilfrid was much better at pumping everyone up and getting them focused on a single goal. I was also terrible at socializing and needed to rely on Charlotte to attend tea parties in my place. Before I could protest, however, Sylvester gave me a light kick. That was a signal for me to keep my mouth shut, so I did just that, no matter how dissatisfied it made me feel. Siglunde watched Sylvester with her head very slightly tilted. I can understand why Ehrenfest, a duchy that is rising through the ranks, would desire an Archduke candidate from somewhere as historied as Dunkelfelger, but I must ask, why do you want her as a second wife? Oh, she's saying that, if anything, Handler should be the first wife, not Rosemine. Okay. That's why she's protesting this. Okay. To explain that, we would need to delve into our behind-the-scenes struggle with Ahrensbach. I wasn't sure how much we could reveal, so I glanced up at Sylvester for support. I can say only that it relates to Ehrenfest's internal circumstances. Oh my, but the purpose of a first wife is to be exploited. She is used as a means to secure the diplomatic support of her home family. Second wives are then taken from one's own duchy and are tasked with managing its nobles. Surely even Ehrenfest is aware of this dynamic. Is that true for all duchies or just Dunkelfelger? It sounded reasonable enough to be a universal rule, but I had never heard it phrased in such a way before. I decided to remain silent while Sylvester said nothing and merely looked at Siglunde. Pray tell, Siglunde continued, what internal circumstances made you think it best to put Handler in the completely fruitless position of second wife? As she would only ever be able to socialize with an Ehrenfest, you would be severing a truly valuable tie to our duchy. I am ever so eager to know, Ab Ehrenfest. Uh-oh. Top-ranking duchies have their own methods, and so do we, was all that Sylvester said in response. We just purged the Form Veronica faction, and we couldn't risk angering the Lies Gang faction, too. Of course, this is also probably related to the whole Gabrielle thing. Of course, Siglunde replied, but my argument still stands. I see it as meaningless for Ehrenfest to take a wife from a top-ranking duchy when you are being completely involuntarily ignorant of common-sense diplomacy. Worse still, it appears that you have no desire to climb the duchy rankings further, or even maintain your current position. For that matter, I am fond of my daughter despite how it may appear, and I would rather she not suffer the same unfortunate fate as a certain Arensbach romantic who married an Ehrenfest Archduke candidate due to become an Archduke some generations ago. She's essentially talking about Gabriella, whatever. She was indirectly criticizing the Ab at the time for his poor treatment of the situation. He had reduced the next Archduke to an Archnoble while welcoming her, failed to raise his duchy ranking, failed to deepen his relationship with Arensbach, and ultimately failed to control his own nobles. It takes many moons spanning a generation before an entire noble population adjusts to how a top-ranking duchy must carry itself. Decades have passed since Ehrenfest welcomed that Arensbach Archduke candidate. How has it changed since then? Sieglinde expressed no sympathy for Ehrenfest having been turned upside down by Gabriel of Arensbach. On the one hand, this helped me to understand how greater duchies viewed things, but on the other, it just irritated me further. Over the past few years, Ehrenfest has shot up to the rankings thanks to the windfall that Lady Rosamund provided, Sieglinde said. However, it seems to me that your duchy has not changed in the least. From there, she obliquely and eloquently voiced the same criticisms we'd already received from Lestalot. Sylvester listened carefully while wearing the same expression I was used to seeing from Wilfried. The indirect phrasing and plethora of euphemisms meant I only understood about half of what was being said, but I was still getting increasingly upset. Is listening quietly how nobles are supposed to socialize? So what will your next move be, Ob Ehrenfest? Sieglinde said. It must be clear to you by now that Lady Rosamund is too large a soul to be contained within Ehrenfest for much longer. Despite my frustration, I continued to listen in silence, mostly because Sylvester was kicking my leg every time it looked as though I might speak up. Still, I didn't want someone else deciding whether I was too large a soul for Ehrenfest. Gudule chose to protect Mestinora by letting her go and entrusting her to Schutzaria, Sieglinde went on. It will be best for Lady Rosamund and for everyone she knows if she is moved to a land where she can operate to her heart's content. She was speaking in a kind voice and with an affable expression, but she was effectively telling Sylvester to give me up already. My heart was full of nothing but bitterness. Sylvester muttered, "This is so stupid," and then glanced my way. Is it all this Dunkelfelger volunteering us to play the part of Schutzaria? Yes, for she will serve as a shield to protect Mestinora and Ehrenfest the duchy handler is marrying into. Hadn't I agreed to play dinner specifically to keep Sylvester from being pressured like this? And why are we having to listen to her criticize us for things that had nothing to do with our match? To top it all off, that had somehow turned into a conversation about Dunkelfelger protecting me or something. Sieglinde kept using indirect phrasing to criticize us and move the conversation in the direction she pleased. All the while maintaining an elegant smile, it was like she was toying with us, gradually tightening the noose around our necks. And it angered me so much that I was dying to throw her words right back in her face. "Excuse me, dear adoptive father," I said, looking up at him. Will we not benefit from some scissors to cut this rope around our throats?" Sylvester widened his eyes, then shut them and waved a hand in defeat. "Do what you want. I'll take care of whatever happens next." What is she going to do? Having secured the permission I needed, I made direct eye contact with Sieglinde, making sure to maintain my elegant smile and posture. "Lady Sieglinde, are you perhaps unfamiliar with the terms under which our duchies play dinner?" "On the contrary, I was told about them at length," she replied, her gaze sharpening in what must have been an attempt to silence me. "Then why do you ignore the results of our sacred game? Lord Lestalot gave his word that Ehrenfest would not be pressured into ending my engagement if we won. Then, casting aside all the ambiguity of noble speech, I smiled and said, 'You lost. Be silent as losers should be.'" Oh! Oh, God. That's probably not the thing you should have said. Oh, God. Why did you say that? Sylvester, smack her for that. Sieglinde merely stared at me as if my words were so direct that she hadn't been able to process them. Lady Rosamund, Handler muttered. She had been facing the ground this entire time, but now she was looking between Sieglinde and me with wide, blinking eyes. Just as Fluttrain and Halfsmere heal in their own ways, what a third party wishes to see and what is satisfactory for those actually involved can be drastically different, I said. My mentor once told me that those who seek eternal peace do not need Gluckalat's divine protection. It was a euphemism that meant exactly the same thing as what Ferdinand had used it. "Get out of my face. I don't need or want your help." Sieglinde's expression changed. "For what reason did you request Hannelore?" "To prevent a bothersome game of dinner from being forced upon us. My intention was to have our Albs discuss the matter instead, so I did not think Lord Lestalot would have the authority to gamble Lady Hannelore's future. But he took the decision into his own hands anyway. You were already aware of all this, I expect. The smile vanished from Segonde's face, and she looked between Handler and me. Did you not select Handler because Ehrenfest needs her for some reason or another? No, not at all. We always intended to nullify that condition after winning. It would be intolerably rude to have Lady Handler move to Ehrenfest after all. I even hoped to use whatever little influence our victory would afford me to help her marry into the duchy of her choosing. You always intended to, you say? Indeed, while Lestalot and Wilfried were ironing out the specifics of our dinner match, Hannelore and I were discussing what we would do if Ehrenfest won. I was genuinely surprised that Segonde didn't seem to know this. All of a sudden, Sylvester smirked. He was poised to strike like a warrior who had just found his enemy's weak point. As you indicated through your Ahrensbach example, Ehrenfest is not yet matured enough to house an Archduke candidate from a greater duchy. If you wish to ensure this happiness of your beloved daughter, then do accept our request. In short, he was suggesting that we sweep this whole discussion about Hannelore marrying into our own duchy under the rug for good. Segonde had just made some severely critical remarks about Ehrenfest. She was bound to leap at the chance to keep her daughter from moving there. Or so I thought. For some strange reason, Segonde started to ponder the offer and then said, "What do you intend to do if my daughter wants to marry into Ehrenfest? Will you embrace some common sense and take her as a first wife? Or will you maintain this irrational approach of yours?" My sincerest apologies, but Ehrenfest has not yet learned the ways of the top-ranking duchies, Sylvester replied with a smile. Amid the chaos of the purge, Ehrenfest needed to prioritize peace and stability above all else, no matter how irrational it made us seem. We didn't need any controversies that would rise up even more of our nobles. Or rile up even more of our nobles. So you will accept her only as a second wife, Segonde remarked. But before she could continue, Hannelore tugged on her sleeve with trembling hands. Mother, Ehrenfest won. It wasn't just her hands, her entire body was shaking like a leaf, but her eyes were filled with resolve and she didn't falter as she looked up at her mother and said, "Do not bother Ehrenfest any further." Hannelore? Hannelore turned to look at Wilfried, who was hosting nobles at another table. I couldn't tell whether the air she was radiating was real or just my imagination, but there was a warm look in her eyes and an even warmer smile on her face. He was the first person to say he would protect me on the battlefield. The first person to offer me a choice, not give me an order. Thus, during that moment, I truly wished to marry into Ehrenfest. She lowered her eyes for a moment, then looked at her mother head-on. The tenderness was gone from her expression and replaced with the determination of someone facing down a challenge. However, Ehrenfest has said they cannot accommodate an Archduke candidate from a greater duchy. They are not ready to welcome me, so pressing the matter further will only serve to inconvenience them. Is it truly acceptable for us to bother the winners after we forced them to play against us to begin with? Should we not grant their wish at the very least? Hannelore, Segonde muttered. Judging by the troubled look on her face, she had not predicted this turn of events. Mother, making such one-sided demands is not the Dunkelfelder way. Should we not be helping Ehrenfest to realize their own desires? Let us take a step back and start by learning what will benefit them. The proud smile with which Hannelore spoke made it plain to see that she was a true Dunkelfelder woman. I was so moved that I almost started to applaud her, but Segonde didn't seem to share my enthusiasm. She rested a hand on her cheek and glared at Hannelore, then looked at Sylvester and me. We are in general agreement as I see it, but we are also plagued by various misunderstandings. Allow me to address them. Misunderstandings? What? Like Ehrenfest not having the same kind of common sense as a greater duchy? Sylvester and I didn't really understand where she was going with this, but we gestured for her to continue nonetheless. According to the reports I received, Lady Rosamund had your duchy lost our dinner match, Ob Ehrenfest would have cancelled your current engagement and allowed you to become Dunkelfelder's first wife. It was conversely agreed that Hannelore would become your duchy's second wife, if you won. That is correct, I replied with a nod. Segonde eyed me suspiciously and then glanced over her shoulder. A scholarly man who had been standing behind her stepped forward, placed a sheet of paper on the table between us, and then returned to his position. It was a formal report that had been sent to Dunkelfelder and outlined the terms of our dinner game. You say that Ehrenfest always intended to let Hannelore go, but when was that actually agreed upon? She indicated the paper. It's not mentioned here at all because we didn't mention it. Because Lestalot wouldn't have agreed to it. When the match was first being discussed, is that not right, Lady Hannelore? She nodded. Lady Rosamund made the suggestion when I apologized for my brother's selfish behavior. We had been drinking tea and using sound-blocking magic tools at the time. After listening to our brief description of events, Segonde made a face as if to say she had to do something. Your discussion may have taken place at the same time in the same room, but you were using sound-blocking magic tools. Did you report your agreement after? The way she spoke made me anxious that I was being accused of claiming our private conversation was a public agreement. The very same evening, I turned to Sylvester. I gave a report to Wilfried and contacted Ehrenfest, did I not? You did, he replied. I received a detailed report on both discussions. I sighed in relief, having successfully proven my innocence. Handler puffed out her chest and similarly declared, I reported everything to my brother over dinner. Over dinner? Segonde asked. Would that not have been too late? Why did you not speak with Lestalot immediately? Introducing new information after the contract has been signed and the conditions finalized is counterproductive. Pardon? The contract? I asked. Wilfried had acknowledged my report about notifying Handler's marriage into Ehrenfest, and Handler had been nodding along in agreement, so I had assumed that everyone was on the same page. But these things hadn't been discussed at the same time and place. Handler had reported my intentions to Lestalot, but since he had already ironed out the details and signed a contract with Wilfried, they hadn't been formally processed. Again, Segonde indicated the paper between us. Contracts are an integral part of bride-taking dinner. They ensure that any agreements made cannot be changed after the match. Wait, this is a contract, not a report, I asked? A closer look revealed that Wilfried had indeed signed it. Apparently this was important for executing a budget, too. Sylvester likewise peered down at the document and frowned. I was aware that terms were discussed, but I never received word of a contract being reported or signed. Wilfried neglected to inform me as well, I said, looking in his direction with my brow furrowed. I doubted he would have failed to mention something so important. Perhaps he did not realize this is a contract, Handler muttered. They are used often in Dunkelfelder and are necessary in the Royal Academy for budgetary reasons. But if even Lady Rosemont and Ob Ehrenfest were unaware... Sylvester and I turned to one another and nodded. We both had assumed the page was some kind of application for them formed for playing dinner, not a contract. If Lestalot hadn't made it clear what was being signed, then it was possible that Wilfried had mistaken it for a budget document. It appears that we did not explain ourselves well enough, Segonde said with a slight grimace, then pointed to the conditions of our dinner game. It is written here that Ehrenfest will take Handler as a second wife, but there is no mention of the agreement being nullified. I thought we could propose it after when I was meant to discuss the match, I said. Would such an arbitrary change not have been defeated the purpose of making an agreement in the first place? True. I had known about the contract, but that didn't change the fact that I intended to challenge the terms of our agreement, the very thing I was criticizing Dunkelfelder for doing. I slumped my shoulders, disappointed in myself, as Segonde landed another blow. Furthermore, Lady Rosemont, you said that Dunkelfelder agreed to stop interfering with their engagement in the event that Ehrenfest won, correct? No such condition is listed here. What? I asked, blinking in surprise, but is the challenge not meant to give up on the object of their affection after losing a game of bride-taking dinner? Lord Lestalot explained as much to me. I was told that Ehrenfest prioritized taking Handler as a second wife. She is listed as your desired prize, but there is no mention of us accepting your current engagement. In a normal game of bride-taking dinner, the consequences of the challenger losing was already decided. They would give up on pursuing the woman they were trying to steal. But after I had expressed my dissatisfaction with that condition and demanded that we be able to take Lady Handler as a second wife, Lestalot had determined that there was no need to stop pressuring me and reported as much to Dunkelfelder. This is the first time I'm hearing of that condition being removed, I muttered. Sylvester heaved a long, exhausted sigh before prodding me in the side of the head. It isn't so unusual for new conditions to override old ones. You might have known that if there hadn't been two discussions happening at the same time. In the future, don't slack on getting everyone on the same page. This contract made Dunkelfelder believe that we cared more about taking Lady Handler as a second wife than putting a stop to their pressure, which caused them to make other misassumptions about what would appeal to us. It was true in both the world of nobles and the world of merchants that written agreements held more weight than mere verbal ones. And that was precisely why Dunkelfelder had assumed our decision based on the terms of our contract. That their assumptions had been off base was entirely our own fault. I feel terrible. Just thinking about what I said to Segonde a moment ago made me wish the earth would swallow me up. She was the first wife of Dunkelfelder, yet I'd been so incredibly rude to her. I genuinely wished I could wipe her memory of our conversation. Please, allow me to apologize from the bottom of my heart, I said. I should not have been so rude or tried to make demands that we are not part of our contract. It seems we misunderstood the nature of the agreement, Sylvester added. I apologize for having failed to confirm all the relevant details. No, Segonde replied. There's no need for that. Ehrenfest is unfamiliar with bride-taking dinner, so we should have done more to explain and oversee the process ourselves. The blame lies primarily with us, therefore we are the ones who must apologize. In the end, she apologized for Lestalot having tried to cancel my engagement, which already had the king's approval, for Handler having failed to rein in the Dunkelfelder men, who were always prone to losing their heads over dinner, and for not having explained the customs exclusive to her duchy. Handler, you will need to reflect on this as well, Segonde continued. I am pleased that you did not forget to apologize to Lady Rosemont, even when you were feeling so down about your future being wagered, but you must never let the men out of your sight when dinner is involved. Lestalot always goes to great heights to secure a dominant position, and the knights become easily excitable. It was your job to keep them under control, and to ensure that Aaron best understood what they were getting into. Carve all this into your mind if you would treasure your friendships. A smile crept onto her face. After all this, I should think you have a better understanding of what it means to be a Dunkelfelder woman. Handler's expression froze in a smile. For a moment, I thought she was gonna put herself down, but then she nodded and said, I will take most care going forward. Segunde returned to her attention to Sylvester and me. Now, Ehrenfest, would you care to explain what you wanted from this game of Ditter? If you do not wish to take Hannelore as a second wife, then we can resolve this here and now. She glanced over at Dunkelfelder's spot in the arena. Preferably before my husband tries to interfere and claim that the result of Ditter cannot be overturned. Sylvester sat up straight. Our primary wish is for Dunkelfelder to cease its attempts to secure Rosemine through marriage. On a more personal note, I would ask that your duchy stop challenging us to Ditter, bride-taking or otherwise. Their demands to play had become something of a yearly occurrence and was putting a considerable burden on Ehrenfest. We had no choice but to participate this time around, and we ended up expanding many of our magic tools and rejuvenation potions. We cannot allow this to continue. Ehrenfest is only a middle duchy after all. I suppose the challenges here have come rather frequently. I shall do whatever I can to ensure that you do not receive another. I would also advise that you stop immediately accepting them. Once an agreement to play has been made, there is no way for me to help. Because we kept accepting Dunkelfelder's request to play treasure-stealing Ditter, they had started to believe that we genuinely enjoyed it. Roffin's reports had apparently even said Lady Rosemary may be too sickly to take the night course, but she loves treasure-stealing Ditter just like Lord Ferdinand did. That isn't accurate at all! Lady Rosemary, do you have any reasons to disagree with Ab Ehrenfest's proposition? Ehrenfest contains that which is precious to me, I replied earnestly. Thus I will never choose to leave it, even when my heart may waver to the face of very tempting offers. Sigunde's expression softened a little. Handler, do you know of anything that Ehrenfest would desire to have? Mother, we have spent years bothering Ehrenfest with our one-sided request to play Ditter, have we not? We will still need to make up for that if you wish to maintain a positive relationship between our two duchies. Consider this an apology not to Lady Rosemary, but specifically all to Ehrenfest. Handler thought for a moment, then clapped her hands together. What if we have Lestalot provide them with some art? It seemed to me that both Lady Rosemary and Lord Wilfrid wanted his illustrations for a Ditter story, but he did not like the idea of someone else altering his work. So it has remained in our possession. We could contribute to Ehrenfest's printing by offering them these illustrations to do as they wish. She observed Segunde's reaction as she spoke, her red eyes sparkling with pride. It made sense that she was so lively considering her previous mentions, and nobody ever asked for her opinion or heeded her advice. But will that really please Ehrenfest? I looked from Segunde's dubious expression to Handler's hopeful smile, then immediately responded with a firm nod. It will. Lady Handler has just put forward a wonderful suggestion that will dramatically increase sales of our books. Isn't that right, Ob Ehrenfest? I was as ecstatic as Handler, but Sylvester just rubbed his forehead. Don't be stupid, he murmured to me. There's got to be something more than that. At least ask for Dunkelfelder's protection or something. Ah, yes, Segunde said, suddenly wearing a more calculating smile. I almost forgot that Lady Rosemary destroyed one of our duchy's ancient treasures. Whoops! Sorry! I didn't do that on purpose. In the blink of an eye, Sylvester agreed that Lestalot's art would suffice. Yes! Yes, either that or pay for that shield. Who knows how much that would cost. We greatly appreciate having Lord Lestalot's illustrations, but can we really use them without his permission, I asked. Segunde nodded. I would say this is an excellent opportunity for him to learn how it feels to have a matter related to you be decided without your involvement. In fact, after he gambled Hannelor's hand in marriage without her approval, I do not believe it is enough. I shall give you one of his paintings as well. She gave her a fine giggle. There's a place in the dormitory that he put a tremendous amount of effort into, and I believe it will do nicely. Ah, the anger in her smile really reminds me of Ferdinand. Good luck, Lord Lestalot. The conversation about Ditter had come to an end, and from there we moved on to discussing the printing industry. Various questions were asked about how many copies of the history book and a Ditter story we intended to prepare, how we were going to sell them, and so on. I provided answers to them all. We would like to print our own books one day, Segunde said. To that end, if you are willing to sell it to us, we are interested in buying the magic tool you used in Ehrenfest. I'm afraid we can't do that, I replied. After all, printing presses weren't magic tools to begin with. I expected as much. Lestalot informed me in his reports that you were keeping the technology a secret to prevent it from spreading. I imagine you intend to maintain private ownership while developing the industry internally. It was standard practice for duchies in our position to sell their technology to the sovereignty or a greater duchy so they could spread from the top down. As such, Segunde was curious to know why Ehrenfest was keeping its knowledge to itself. She punctuated her question with a brief remark that our duchy's actions could not be understood using common sense, which was potentially my fault. We have decided to accept manuscripts from other duchies and print them within Ehrenfest for the time being. Only once it's become a familiar part of our culture will we start spreading it beyond our borders. At the moment, Ehrenfest nobles were still getting used to all the ins and outs of printing. Only once they understood copyright laws and the cash flow of the industry would we start expanding to other duchies. Sylvester nodded in agreement with my response, then gave a smile to Sigunde. This is speaking of the future, but when we do decide to start printing in other duchies, I promise to approach Dunkelfelger first. I see, then I shall eagerly await that day. Incidentally, I have been rather curious about this book of yours, The Story of Fernestine. The first volume seems to indicate that the heroine was based on you and that you were being abused in Ehrenfest. That's wrong. Despite the seriousness of the accusation, Sylvester knew whom the protagonist was actually based on, so he had to very casually cover his mouth to stifle his laughter. It's based on a gender-bent Ferdinand. Oh my god. Does Ferdinand know about this? If he does, oh my god! And if not, I can't wait to see his reaction. Sigunde continued, It is well known that you have been gathering stories in the Royal Academy and allowing other students to borrow your books. And many have begun to wonder if this is your own very discreet way of calling for help. It does not help that so few of the rumors spread about Ehrenfest during the Archduke Conference were positive. Dunkelfelger already went on a rampage to save Lord Ferdinand, and now I must keep a firm grip on the reins to ensure that the same error is not committed in an attempt to save you. I'm very grateful for that, but for obvious reasons I couldn't reveal that the story was really based on Ferdinand, and I definitely couldn't reveal that the author, Elvira, was using it as an outlet for how she felt about him being sent to Ahrensbach by royal decree. I expect that reading the second volume will eradicate any such thoughts, I said, so I will make sure to always include it when lending others the first. I thank you ever so much for your considerate warning. Many will surely rejoice over the fact, Handler replied. I was in agony when I realized the first volume ended midway through the story. I cannot wait to see how it concludes. She was being very generous with her praise of our books, and it was obvious how eagerly she was anticipating the next one. But as I thought about what she had said, something occurred to me. I never told her that the story of Fernestine was actually 3 volumes long. It was time to break the bad news to her. Lady Hannelore, the story of Fernestine actually ends with the 3rd volume, not the 2nd. That can't be, Hannelore choked, her hands pressed against her cheeks in despair. Oh, God. Do I want to continue? I'll wait until the next video. I'll see you guys in the next one.